Is this on? Yes, it is.
Rudy's Revelation.
You can't handle the truth.
Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. It is July 17th, Wednesday. Welcome to today's episode. So today I'm going to be talking more about some of the more recent developments in the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. We had some interesting developments. I spoke with Perry last night on an edition of Tuesdays with Perry, episode 83. And we talked about the Iranian angle. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And that I'm going to talk about Joe Biden destroying the United States Supreme Court coming up right now. All right, the first article up I'm going to talk today about is the New York Post. Would-be Trump assassin was spotted by cops twice, 26 minutes before he wounded ex-prez, killed retired fire chief. Now, I'm going to get into that accusation. First of all, we knew that it wasn't that he was spotted 26 minutes beforehand. He was spotted hours before acting suspiciously. But 26 minutes before, they saw him taking a range reading. He was metering distance, a rangefinder. And that is an indication of, that was an activity of an assassin. If you ever looked at the movie Shooter, you could see Mark Wahlberg's character taking wind readings, measuring distances. So anything that's akin to that would obviously be, somebody in the security industry would obviously give them pause. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about what the cover is. And the cover is, this is from AP, Homeland Security Inspector General investigates Secret Service handling of security at Trump rally. We know there were security lapses, to put it kindly. There were security lapses. It seemed like a stand down, like a lie hop with a bit of plausible deniability. I call it a whoopsie. And plausible deniability is always, well, we're not uber competent, so everybody makes mistakes. We just made a mistake. I'm sorry. But if you look at all these mass shootings, just violence in general, unmotivated violence is the best way I want to term it, because you get in the car in the morning, you drive somewhere, there's a motive to do so. So to say that somebody is going to commit a heinous act, take a firearm, load the firearm, point the firearm at living human beings, pull the trigger, and you're going to say, well, there's no motive to do that. It's infamy or it's rage against the machine, what have you. That's not the way it works. Like I said, in the morning you get in your car to drive someplace. You just don't wind up in your car driving aimlessly. I imagine that would occur sometime, but not in general. So I'm going to revisit my second shooter theory. Here's a diagram during in a satellite image. And I supposed that there was a second shooter over on these other southern buildings across Main Street in the Butler Farm Show property. Now, there were the fairgrounds that Trump spoke at, and next to the fairgrounds, north of the fairgrounds, was a company, AGR, it's a glass manufacturer, a large manufacturing plant, and it wasn't really separated by anything other than a low fence. So people could actually get to the property. of the manufacturing property, get back into the rally property, because people weren't being charged to enter. And I said this would have been a good place because they were screening from these trees, a residential neighborhood with easy exit or exfil, but there could have easily been shooters on any of these other buildings that were part of the Butler Farm Show property. There was an exercise ground, there was a pond, and several other livestock buildings, and none of this is even being regarded at all during any sort of investigation. What was happening in here in the southern part of the property with this dirt parking lot and easy exit into a residential neighborhood, and nobody's looking at that. Nobody even looked. They said on the southern barn behind Trump, there was another sniper team, but now we have conflicting reports that there was only one counter sniper team. And we saw plenty of pictures of those two gentlemen that were looking directly at the manufacturing plant the whole time with binoculars. I was a little concerned because they didn't have their rifles up on their tripods, even when rally goers were filtering in before Trump got there. So they weren't ready because someone could have easily opened fire beforehand and they wouldn't have been ready. But they were looking directly at the manufacturing plant the whole time. That was their job. They were pointed in that direction. And people said, oh, well, he was on a sloped route. They couldn't see him. Minutes before, first of all, hours beforehand, there were reports of police officers following this suspicious guy, apparently Crooks. Half an hour before, they saw him taking range readings, distance readings. That is extremely suspicious. Was any of this radioed to the sniper team? And he was wandering around near the manufacturing plant. All this, so they were ready for him, and there were no drones in the air. And mind you, if we go back to this picture here, satellite picture, north and to the east of the manufacturing plant is a water tower. So even if you weren't flying a drone, which you should have been, because a drone would have spotted any snipers, including those over in the southern part of the property. But to the east, there's a water tower. You could have easily put someone in there, a spotter, to look at the roofs, both sloped parts of roofs. And the water tower was almost twice or three times as high as the manufacturing plant buildings. Some were two-story. The building he was on was Crooks was on was a one-story building. And the mainstream media keeps putting him on the easternmost part of the roof where he would have had an obscured view. Why? We're going to talk about that. The eyewitnesses and the video footage shows him on the western part of the roof, which would have given him a clear shot at President Trump. So why would you move to another part of the roof where you're actually closer to the sniper team and then your shot is obscured? Doesn't make any sense. So let's look at this. So the AP article has a picture which is most telling, but the headline reads, 3 days after attempted assassination, Trump shooter remains elusive enigma. Of course, there's no motive, there's no nothing. But let's look at the picture. Okay, this is before the flag was even taken down. You see the juxtaposition of the two flanking bleachers, which are pointed outward, bleachers behind Trump being outward, right? We could see this, and that the stage slightly behind the tip of the flanking bleachers, slightly behind. Now I want to show this picture here, which is another drone view, but it shows where Trump's stage is, where Trump was exactly. And where do they put the gunman? They put the gunman in the middle of the roof of the glass manufacturing plant. Now, he wasn't there. He was all the way to the left if you're looking at this diagram. If you're listening in, we're looking at sort of an overhead shot from the south, looking at the fairgrounds and then to the manufacturing building. You can see the legs of the water tower there as well. But you're not looking at the rest of the Butler Farm Showgrounds where a second shooter would have been hidden. Now, they keep putting him on the far side of the roof to explain that he shot people in the stands, spectators in the stands shot and killed. So now they're saying that all the other people that were shot were here. Now, as I said, time and time again, we're going to go back to this slide in just a second. Time and time again, your stray shots fall behind target. They don't fall in front of target. If you've ever shot at a range, particularly long distance, how often do your rounds fall in front or hit something in front? Now, the only reason they're explaining this, I'm going to go back to the slide, is because they put the gunman further to the east on the roof. And that would say, oh, that's why his shots, and somebody said in my comment section that, oh, his first shot hit somebody who stood up in the stands. And that's why they put him further to the east on the roof. But all the video footage and the witnesses say he was way to the west on the roof because they could see him on the roof. He literally would have had to have, or actually would have had to get up and run across the roof to get to the middle of the roof to start shooting. Now, why would you run to get to a more obscured spot? Is he worried that the eyewitnesses could see you? Now, this is where I'm going to go back to the slide here because this is the most telling picture we've seen so far because the stands are shown. So the witnesses were here. If you could follow me in the fairground, there was a little fence here that people were standing here and looking at the jumbotrons, and they could see him right on the edge of the roof here. This is where all the commotion was. This is where the video footage was taken, to the west of the southernmost building on the manufacturing plant property. The rest of the property has some 2 stories and then single stories, which the building Crooks was on was single story. But they keep putting him to the east. Now, did he run away from the eyewitnesses to get a more obscure shot? There's no evidence of that because we've seen pictures of the law enforcement standing over Crooks's body, which was still visible from the ground practically. So he was still at the edge of the roof, dead. So he did not move to the middle of the roof. He did not, because you could still see his body. How could you, if he was in the middle of the roof, there's no way you could photograph his body. There's no way. That's just physics. So they keep moving him to the middle, so this is complicity. The AP is complicit in this operation. Why do they keep moving him in every diagram into the middle of the roof, or in some diagrams all the way to the western edge of the roof where he wasn't spotted there? He was spotted, the eastern part of the roof. He was spotted on the western side of the roof where concert goers could see him. This is the point, and I'm getting into the trajectory now to tell you why. Because, going to go back to the slide one more time. If there was a shooter from the south, from a raised position, that your stray shots would have gone into the bleacher here. So this is your trajectory. From southwest to northeast, almost towards, not towards the parking lot of the manufacturing. That's your trajectory. right? Not this way. Okay, he would have been shooting this way. He would have had a clear shot from the western part of the build, the eastern part of the western part of the building. Excuse me, I'm getting confused now. And that his shots, his stray shots, would have went into this bleacher, the southernmost flanked bleacher. He must have fired so wildly that if you wanted to shoot at Trump, all your stray shots would have went into this bleacher. But we have the wounded people behind. And I'm going to go back to this other slide here. So where are we looking? We're looking this way. So exactly, this is what I got exactly. We have a sniper on one of the buildings in the southern part, a second shooter in one of the buildings in the southern part of the Butler Farm Show property. Probably the building that's west to the pond. But unfortunately, I want to put him maybe on the southernmost building because it provides easy exit through this dirt parking lot into the residential neighborhood. So he wouldn't have to walk out in the open across a road, etc. I mean, you could easily get cover for that. But this is what I'm talking about. Okay, you look at this image again, and the trajectory would have had to been this way. Not diagonal, but almost straight across the top of the bleacher where Trump was standing. All right, so I'm just going to get into the story again. I just want to show you this again. This is the bleacher. These are where the people were killed at this very edge. So this is the trajectory straight across. It's hard to say. Would have had to have been south, because this way, that doesn't make sense. All right, let's get into the AP story. The AP story talks about the shooter. He sat by himself, didn't talk to anybody, didn't try to make conversation. He didn't leave writings or a suicide note. The absence of satisfactory explanation has led to Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas to recount a lengthy federal investigation in 2017 mass shooting in Las Vegas, the deadliest such attack in nation's history. The probe closed after 17 months without finding any motive that drove the 64-year-old gunman, Paddock, to spray more than 1,000 rounds into the crowd of concert goers, other than to attain a certain degree of infamy. Just a brief word on the Las Vegas shooting. All that seemed like a crock of shit. If you looked at the maintenance man who apparently saw the shooter, was the first to confront the shooter, he had to go on Ellen DeGeneres' show with a handler. So if you look at that with a fine-tooth comb, and the fact that there was video footage of people crawling on roofs and stuff, and the fact that the Moulage, an Army Moulage truck was there, and Moulage is basically applying fake injuries, realistic-looking injuries, to train the Army. Plus, you have acoustic profiles, and you have other audio recordings and video recordings of seeing like muzzle flashes on different roofs and audio from different roofs. Plus, you have the video of the actual room, the corner room where Paddock was supposedly have cut out a window to shoot through, where there was no cutout window, no muzzle flashes during the shooting. And a lot of the shots, audio of the shots, seem to be coming through speakers, amplification devices. Very, very strange. All right, enough digression of that. Crooks, he was described by classmates at Bethel Park High School as smart but standoffish, often seen wearing headphones and preferring to sit alone at lunch while looking at his phone. So he's indulging in internet. Some said he often was mocked by students for clothes he wore, which included hunting outfits, and for continuing to wear a mask after COVID pandemic was over. which means he was bullied almost every day, which means he was susceptible to propaganda. If you're still wearing a fucking mask, or you were wearing masks long after the pandemic was over, you are subject to propaganda, online propaganda, which he was entrenched in. He was so into his phone and into the internet, he didn't engage with anybody on a real level. So that makes him susceptible to propaganda, brainwashing, or any new friends he might make. Going back to the story, 1997 Secret Service study showed those who attempted attempted assassination since 1949 found there's no single indicator that a person might seek to take the life of a public figure. However, 2/3 of the attackers were described as social isolates. Easily manipulated, I say. Like Crooks, few had a history of violent crime or criminal records. Most attackers also had a history of handling weapons, but no formal weapons or military training. So this guy was supposed to be a marksman because he handled weapons. Well, I don't believe he was able to shoot a moving target, even if moving slightly, virtually scoring a headshot by somebody who wasn't trained. And apparently he didn't have a scope. We don't know. We don't know if he had a bipod, how he balanced his weapon. Was it directly on the peak of the roof? We don't know. Oh, he had a remote control explosive. That doesn't mean anything. The story goes on to say, as a freshman, Crooks had tried out for the high school rifle team, but was rejected for poor marksmanship. Through his family, he was a member of the Clareton Sportsman Club, a shooting range about 11 miles. The club had an outdoor range for high-powered rifles with targets set at distances up to 187 yards. High-powered rifles. Other than the 22, is there such thing as a low-powered rifle? There isn't. Rifles are high-powered, except for a 22. And usually the only people that use 22 rifles are CIA assassins or young kids who are training with firearms. The story goes on to say, the day before the shooting, Thomas Crooks went to the sportsman club and practiced on the rifle range. According to the federal intelligence briefing obtained by the AP, on the day of the attack, he purchased 50 rounds of 5.56 ammo from the rifle, a local gun shop, and drove to Butler, Pennsylvania, the site of the Trump rally. Okay, so 5.56 is going to confuse people. It's 223. So it's slightly the caliber, and even Richard Steele, the guy who's on MSNBC, who used to be the head of the RNC, described it as a high caliber rifle. A 223 is not a high caliber rifle. It just isn't. It's a little bit, the caliber is a little bit bigger than a 22, which is the smallest caliber of rifle. Smallest caliber, period. So it's not it's not a high caliber rifle at all. So let's move on. Witnesses and law enforcement officials said Crooks walked around for at least half an hour before climbing onto the roof of the adjacent building. That's not true. He was walking around hours before and was reported as a suspicious person. Had half an hour, 26 minutes before, he was reported taking distance readings with a rangefinder. That's suspicious activity. That's not just a suspicious person, that's suspicious activity. So that happened half an hour before he started shooting, and then he avoided law enforcement officials who apparently were in the building at the glass manufacturing. What they were doing in there was probably planning the attack. Why would you be inside a building if you're doing security? There's no point of being inside. You'd be outside. You'd be on the rooftops. You'd be where you could hear people. You wouldn't be inside a building unless you were planning an attack, you were looking at satellite imagery, you were monitoring, and you didn't want anyone to hear your radio communications that might have been covert. That's the only reason you'd be inside a building or a van. And they showed them removing a panel truck after the investigation, and they basically wiped the scene clean, and the FBI deleted this guy's Discord account as well. Going back to the article, I'm getting a little lengthy here. I know, and I started late too, excuse me. Okay, and then as spectators screamed for police to respond, Crooks opened fire, letting loose 2 quick bursts. A Secret Service counter sniper fired back within 15 seconds. They said moments yesterday, killing Crooks with a shot to the head. Now, let me just go over this last line. The Associated Press is just disingenuous. Spectators screamed for police to respond minutes before Crooks opened fire. They showed him crawling still on the sloped part of the roof at the western edge of the roof. So if it's as AP reports, as spectators screamed for police where they could see him on the westernmost side of the roof, Crooks opened fire, letting loose 2 quick bursts. Well, how could he be on the eastern side of the roof, according to the diagram by the Associated Press, if the spectators could still see him on the western part of the roof? And that they were screaming minutes before. Did he have a chance to run across the roof? Perhaps, but he could have been shot. And the Secret Service would have seen him. And now they say the Secret Service counter sniper fired back within 15 seconds. Yesterday they said moments after he fired. Now it's 15 seconds because they had to allow for what they say are 5 or 6 shots. I only counted 3 or 4 for him. Bop, 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 bop. 1, 2, 3, 4. There was like a little pause before the 4th shot. Then you heard bop, 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 bop. And it was all over. Because they had 2 snipers. So they're firing with automatic weapons. Now, they wouldn't fire on automatic. They might, but unlikely snipers would shoot 1 shot at a time. But there were 2 snipers all shooting at the same time. But even then, the fire was so rapid there at the end, it was hard to discern. Trump said this week that a bullet clipped his ear. So Trump said the bullet clipped his ear, and now there's left-wing conspiracy theory that his ear got cut by glass from the teleprompter. Now his head was turned. The ear that got shot was the ear away from the teleprompter. So this is just physically impossible. All right, moving on to other headlines here because we're going to run long. Would-be Trump assassin Thomas Crooks was nicknamed the school shooter, teased for his body odor and hygiene. It sounds very much like the Parkland shooter, who was referred to as school shooter. So the powers that be are picking people who are already profiled as, the type of person who would do this sort of thing. So they take the profile and then they contact the target who is already profiled as a shooter, right? And then they convince him or goad him into doing the shooting. That's my theory in any case. Because with the Buffalo shooting, you did an ex-FBI person, an older gentleman, and what is a 50, 60-year-old ex-FBI agent doing, chatting with a 20-something-year-old young man that has mental problems? All right, moving on. CNN, Secret Service ramped up security after intel of Iran plot to assassinate Trump. No known connection to the shooter. Perry and I talked about this last night, so he actually had this information before it broke in the news. He has a connection in the Republican Party, apparently, high-ranking person that he talked to that said there was an Iranian plot, and we discussed how there could be a conspiracy, not that Crooks, the Patsy, knew the Iranian sniper who might have been the second sniper, but if you take into account the Las Vegas shooting, which, as we piece together, was run by Saudi intelligence, because it was right after Trump organized the coup in Saudi Arabia that put MBS, it's MBS, right, into power. Salman, Mohammed bin Salman, I think it is, put him into power, and he is moderate. He was an extreme Wahhabist, which a lot of people in the royal family in Saudi Arabia are, and so is Saudi intelligence. And if you didn't know, Saudi intelligence is one of the best intelligence outfits there are. Close to Mossad. Egyptian also army intelligence is very good intelligence as well. But in any case, we talked about this last night, so check out episode 83 of Tuesdays with Perry, where we discussed the Iranian plot, which was obviously for revenge for Soleimani. But I'm not going to digress into Las Vegas too, but if you didn't know, Saudi military and Saudi intelligence was having a convention in Las Vegas the night of the Las Vegas shooting, so put that together. So we don't know. We know that militants, Iranian militants, and then Perry put together the thing with Valerie Jarrett, who apparently is Persian, but I'm not going to go down that road right now. But we did have Iranian Shia militia militants come over the southern border recently. So is this part of the, they always get foreigners to shoot at Americans because they're more likely to be willing to do it. You get somebody who hates behind the trigger because then they're more willing to cause carnage. In any case, the CNN article goes on to say U.S. authorities obtained intelligence from a human source in recent weeks on a plot by Iran to try to assassinate Donald Trump. A development led the Secret Service increasing security around the former president. Multiple people briefed, but there's no indication that Thomas Crooks, the would-be assassin who attempted to kill the former president, was connected to the plot. Well, we don't know. Secret Service learned of the increased threat from this threat stream. National Security Council directed and contacted the Secret Service at senior level to be absolutely sure that they continue to track the latest reporting. Secret Service shared the information with a detailed lead, and the Trump campaign was made aware of the evolving threat. In the response to the increased threat, the Secret Service surged resources to assets to protection for former president and all of his advanced team on Saturday. This was all advanced on Saturday. Well, all the warnings didn't seem to help. So we have this increased threat assessment, and then we have a glaring security failure. How would this happen? Were there Iranians on the grounds that day? We don't know. Maybe there was Iranian, more than likely. See, this is the thing. If you convince people to hate Trump and something bad was about to happen to Trump, would you look the other way? Or maybe during an election, it's election fraud and you're an election official, but you hate Trump so much that you'd look the other way while someone was triple counting ballots? Perhaps. Secret Service officials had warned Trump repeatedly against holding outdoor rallies which pose greater threats. The warnings have been general in nature. All right, moving on. It goes on to say the investigation on Saturday's attempted assassination of former President Trump is active ongoing. Law enforcement has reported the investigation has not identified ties between the shooter and any accomplice or co-conspirator, foreigner and domestic. The permanent mission in the Islamic Republic said these accusations are unsubstantiated and malicious. So they're saying, the Iranians are saying it's not true. Whatever, you're just trying to muddy the water surrounding this. The fact is that this leads me, it's almost like if you watch CNN or watch MSNBC, you just have to think exactly the opposite. Whatever they're saying, it's the opposite. So when the mainstream media, which is the corporate propaganda, is saying one thing, that is misinformation and disinformation. That's misdirection. They keep pointing at the shooter, but they're not pointing at anything else that could have been going on in the southern part of the Butler farm farm grounds, whatever. All right, more headlines. Exclusive 4 in 5 Americans fear the country is sliding into chaos. Reuters Ipsos poll. Not surprising. Now, the big story of the day, I had to go into the assassination conspiracy because it is a conspiracy. What does the conspirators say? What did the conspirators always say? Lone wolf. Lone wolf, lone wolf, lone wolf. A disturbed individual with no motive. Got into his car, bought ammunition, loaded his rifle, eluded security, climbed out on the roof, was allowed to climb up on a roof and take several pot shots at an ex-president who many people hate, including the establishment, because he's trying to disassemble the establishment. But that's where my mind goes, because it's shootings, major crimes are the easiest to unwind. Other conspiracies behind closed doors, people talking to do other things, moving money around, that's harder to unravel. Selling influence is way harder to unravel than a shooting, because shooting has a lot of physical evidence, eyewitnesses, et cetera, et cetera. And although that kind of conspiracy is much easier to unwind, but they're telling you lone wolf, lone wolf, lone wolf, which leads me to believe that it's not a lone wolf. Because it takes me back to Las Vegas, as Mayorkas did, is one guy brought all these guns into a hotel room, cut out a window with nobody noticing, you know, and on an upper floor, the glass is like 3 inches thick. Without allowing the glass to fall out and crash, alerting somebody on the ground, or for a 300-pound piece of glass to fall inside and not alert anybody. Now it was, but you know, when they found him, he had shot himself. So why would you do this? Shoot yourself, and the first person to encounter the shooter while the shooting was still going on had to appear on public television with a handler. Anyway, the real major story today is the Washington Post. Biden set to announce support for the major Supreme Court changes. Why is this no surprise? While everybody is focused on the Trump assassination, so this was a distraction, and the RNC, Biden comes out and says, I'm going to rip it all down. I'm going to rip apart the Supreme Court before I leave, but they don't have a majority in Congress, so it's going to be hard for him to do. Will he do it illegally with executive action? I'm sure he will. Anyway, President Biden is finalizing plans to endorse major changes to the Supreme Court in the coming weeks, including proposals for legislation to establish term limits for justices. Why would he do that? And an enforceable ethics code, according to two people briefed on the plans. He is also weighing whether to call the constitutional amendment to eliminate broad immunity for presidents and other constitutional office holders. Why would he do that? Speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss. Now, he's going to do this right before Trump takes office. I'm going to need your help in the Supreme Court because I'm about to come out. I don't want to be prematurely announce it, but about to come out with a major initiative on limiting the court. I've been working with constitutional scholars for the last 3 months, and I need some help. He needs some help to destroy the United States. He's talking about altering one of the three branches of government, and then he's going to alter the third branch of government in such a way that it affects the other branch of government, the executive branch. Why? Why are all these things needed? Do you want to tighten ethics regulations? That seems plausible. Why would you want to put in term limits? Because you have young conservatives on the court that might last another 30, 40 years. All ridiculous. I'm surprised he's not changing the number of justices. I'm sure that's coming too. He just didn't announce that. So he wants to destroy one of the branches of government that was outlined by the framers. The founders of this country outlined it. And so I'm just going to change it with executive action. I need your help. It's treason. I'm sorry. I always get too excited about this shit. It's just... People have to see it for what it is, but most people don't read or watch the news. Mediaite, getting worse for the president. CNN's John King says Democrats fear Trump on track for blowout 330 electoral vote win. I'm surprised Biden is going to change the electoral college. I'm sure he wants to do that too. Reuters, U.S. Representative Schiff warns he's still representative. Did he lose the Senate race? We don't know. I think that's coming up in November. U.S. Representative Schiff warns of big Democratic losses with Biden a top ticket, according to the New York Times. New York Times also reports Biden's circle shrinks as Democrats fear election wipeout. President Biden increasingly isolated during the biggest political crisis of his presidency in a historic standoff with his party. Associated Press, Kennedy and West, third-party ballot drives are pushed by secretive groups and Republican donors. Stay with me now. So what? That's probably why Kennedy, they said Trump met with Kennedy to ask for an endorsement. Well, Kennedy's still in the race. He's not going to endorse Trump. Maybe Trump was asking, if you drop out, will you endorse me? But more than likely, the Trump campaign, Trump backers, and other Republicans are pushing third-party candidates like Cornel West and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. because they're going to sap votes away from Biden. So a win is a win, and it has to be a blowout, or you're not going to be able to beat the cheat. Watch for the avian flu pandemic coming out too. Right, Daily Express U.S., Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis make huge U-turns with fawning speeches for Donald Trump. Republican critics turn supporters include Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis spoke on this second night of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Let's not forget, Nikki Haley is an establishment politician within the Republican Party. So she's a party, all establishment politicians are party politicians, just like the communists are party politicians. So it's the uniparty, so it doesn't matter. So if she wants to keep her standing within the Republican Party and amongst the rhinos and the corporate class, she's going to have to, knuckle under, just like Democrats now are seemingly going to fall behind Biden. Ron DeSantis, who is actually an acolyte of Trump, he didn't believe so while running for president, but halfway through his campaign, he realized that his backers, anti-Trumpers in the Republican Party, establishment types, in the evil cabal, wanted him to go after Trump. So he did, and what happened to his numbers? They fell. How could you be an acolyte of a politician and then go against your mentor and expect your constituents to be favorable of that? They wouldn't. And more big news from the Wall Street Journal. Musk turbocharges Silicon Valley support for Trump. Selection of J.D. Vance's running mate likely to fuel momentum for tech leaders frustrated with the Biden administration. But I also reported yesterday that after the shooting at the rally, that Musk endorsed President Trump, and then he set up $45 million a month into a Trump PAC. So $45 million a month until November. So you can do the math. It's close to a couple $100 million. And so what's happening in its stead, seeing that Musk is doing that, billionaires take sides as turbulent presidential race heats up. So now people like Soros are doubling down, and they're committing also to their candidate of choice. We don't know who that's going to be, but it's going to be the Democrats, because the establishment cabal is exactly that. They built the establishment, and some of these elites believe their ancestry built civilization. And so they believe they're heir apparent to running the civilization, however they see fit. And so we know about globalization and all that. They want to get rid of the sovereignty of the nation state and the individual and all these things in their agenda. And so all the people that are embroiled in that for a variety of different reasons, including George Soros and others, Bill Gates, they want to keep propping up the establishment while Trump types want to tear it down. And you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You want to keep institutions, but you have to root out all the subversive establishment types who are undermining the Constitution and the sovereignty of the individual, the liberties of the individual that are outlined in the Bill of Rights. Okay. More headlines, CNBC, a growing number of parents are refusing to give their children smartphones and the movement is going global. The evidence linking smartphone use with mental health harms in children is growing, and one grassroots organization in the UK is supporting parents who are refraining from giving their kids devices. Now let's look at the mental health of Crooks, the supposed shooter. He was on his phone 24/7 with earbuds in. He was plugged into the internet. And these type of people who, mind you, are antisocial because they weren't social in high school, but they were in a social environment. So since high school, his rootedness in the internet would make him more and more antisocial, relying only on chat groups and chat friends to guide his behavior, possibly his parents, because he was working in a health facility, and so he really didn't have any interaction with his peers. And that's where people seek information from. So if you're a 60-year-old or 50-year-old FBI or military intelligence person posing as a 20-something, you could easily influence a kid like this over Discord. Anyway, back to this article. Founded by Daisy Greenwell and Claire Finnenhow in February, set up a variety of group chats for parents locally across the UK and grew to over 60,000 members in a few weeks, according to its website. We all know that the internet is bad for people. Having a mobile internet, a smartphone, and if you're plugged into it with your earbuds in and a VR goggles and you're looking at your phone and you never put it down, you're in trouble. And that was the thing that they understood with the TV. They're able to beam propaganda in such a way that would put you in a trance state, has just morphed into now the smartphone. Because the smartphone could make you smart. You have all the information of the world at your fingertips. If you ever want to know something, you could easily find it out. And if you're inquisitive, that could make you really smart. But the smartphone is actually smarter than you. And instead of doing that, all you do is this, looking for peer programming is what social media is peer programming. Anyway, a couple more articles here. Jack Black axes tour over bandmates' Trump comments. If you didn't know what happened here, one of his bandmates said, I wish Trump was killed a few inches over and we would have solved all our problems. And the backlash against the band was overwhelming by people on both sides of the political divide. So Jack Black not wanting to when he didn't condemn the comment right away, but then when he saw the effect, he canceled the tour because they were going to boycott the rest of the tour anyway. So, and then a couple more articles here. The Telegraph, London is slowly turning into unlivable nightmare. Of course, England was ruined by the Tories and by Labour, and now Labour, they have to cobble together a government, with the UK Reform Party, which is Nigel Farage's outfit. But they ruined it, particularly with immigration. I don't want to delve into that too much, because I want to call it there. Thanks for sticking with me today. Please engage the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, give me a thumbs up, and particularly share the podcast if you wouldn't mind. That would help me out tremendously. In any case, last night we had an episode of Tuesdays with Perry, episode 83. Check that out, where we talk extensively about the conspiracy possibly involving Iran and a second shooter at the Trump rally in Butler, Pennsylvania. Also, remember, you're under attack psychologically, biologically, psychologically through your cell phone, biologically through chemicals in your food and water and medicine. Also, join me live every day on Rumble around 10 a.m., sometimes 10:30. I was late today. I slept late. My apologies. Overslept. I wasn't feeling too good. Really tired last night, and then I overslept. So I'll see you tomorrow. Stay hip to the trick. Respect.
Google me, bitch!